Have you ever wondered what happens the day she realizes she can no longer control you? The moment she senses it, that shift in your energy, the calm in your voice, the silence that no longer hides pain but radiates power, the instant she understands she's lost her hold on you, everything changes. Because control was never about her words, it was about your reactions. She fed off every explanation you gave, every argument, every attempt to make her understand your side. That was her power, not your weakness, but your emotion. And when that emotion goes quiet, her control vanishes with it. At first, she won't believe it. She'll test you. She'll try to provoke you, question you, stir jealousy, or weaponize silence, anything to bring back the old version of you. The version that was predictable, reactive, easy to read. But not anymore. You've mastered the art of calm awareness, the ability to feel without clinging, to care without chasing, to observe without being owned, and that terrifies her. Because the man who can master himself can never be mastered by anyone else. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's exactly who you've become, calm, grounded, untouchable. Take a deep breath, feel that quiet strength within you, the awareness that needs no validation, no explanation, no reaction. That stillness is your power. It's what makes her lose control. Because today is not about getting her back, it's about getting yourself back. Control rarely looks like control. It wears the mask of connection, love, concern, the desire to just talk. But underneath, it's about power. She never needed to hold your hand, only your mind. The moment she realized your emotions were predictable, she learned how to pull the strings. A delayed text, a vague comment, a little silence, that was enough. She didn't have to say much, she just had to create tension, and you did the rest. That's the illusion of control. You were never controlled by her actions, but by your reactions to them. Epictetus said, "When someone provokes you, remember that it is your opinion which provokes you." The real chains are invisible, built from your need to explain, your fear of loss, your hope that she'll finally see your worth. Those emotions kept you orbiting around her, even when you thought you'd walked away. But discipline changes everything. You begin to see the mechanism, the cycle of provocation and reaction, and you step out of it. You start responding like a man who's seen the pattern before, who recognizes the game for what it is. You don't get cold, you get clear. When she sends a late night text, you don't overthink. When she posts to test your attention, you don't react. When she withdraws affection, you don't chase. Because the man who controls his emotions controls the entire dynamic. And that's when she begins to feel something she's never felt before, uncertainty. The same uncertainty she once created in you is now her own. She was losing her grip on the only thing her ego depended on, your reactions. The calmer and more disciplined you became, the more powerless she felt. Because she finally realized the game was over, not because you walked away, but because you stopped playing. The moment you stopped reacting, everything began to reverse. It was quiet, almost invisible, but she could feel it. That shift in your energy, the lack of response, the steady calm that once collapsed under her words was different now. It wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness, it was indifference. And indifference has a gravity of its own. For the first time, she felt uncertainty. The old methods, the texts, the silence, the subtle manipulation no longer worked. You had become unreadable, unpredictable, unbothered. And that terrified her. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's the discipline of a stoic mind, stillness as strategy. You no longer spoke to prove yourself or move to be noticed. Every decision you made now came from clarity, not emotion. Suddenly, she was the one overthinking. She replayed every moment when she once felt sure of your attention, wondering what had changed. She felt your absence not as silence, but as power. Because when you stop feeding someone your emotional energy, they begin to starve, not from loneliness, but from losing access to influence. She started projecting. Maybe you were talking to someone else. Maybe you had already moved on. She might even reach out not to reconnect, but to recalibrate, to see if she still had a hold on you. But when your responses were calm, brief, or non-existent, her control dissolved. That's when she began to realize something she had always denied. She never loved your peace. She loved your reaction to her chaos. Now that your peace was unshakable, her ego began to panic. You flipped the entire equation without saying a word. You became the center of gravity, and she was the one spinning around you. That's the emotional reversal when the man who once sought approval now stands silent, and the woman who once held control now seeks understanding. She tried the same tactics, the same tone, the same silence, the same traps, but nothing happened. You didn't chase, you didn't explain, you didn't fight for closure. You had simply outgrown the game. And that realization hit her harder than any argument ever could. Control only exists as long as it's believed in. Her power had never been real. It was borrowed from your emotional reactions. The moment you stopped reacting, you broke the illusion. The strings she thought she was pulling now hung loose in her hands. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And that truth pierced through everything. She realized your peace could no longer be disturbed because it no longer depended on her. You didn't take the bait because you didn't need the fish. You didn't enter the game because you'd already won by refusing to play. That's when the cracks began to show. Her posts grew louder, but her confidence weaker. Her words became colder, but her silence heavier. She wasn't trying to punish you anymore. She was trying to reach you. But she couldn't, because the version of you she once controlled no longer existed. That was the real punishment, not revenge, but evolution. You didn't have to destroy her ego. It was collapsing under its own weight. Egos thrive on reaction. They suffocate in stillness. Your silence became a mirror, showing her exactly what she lost. A man who no longer bends, no longer seeks, no longer lives for validation. That's when she finally understood the truth. The power she thought she had over you was never hers. It was yours all along. And when a man reclaims that power, the entire game ends. When a man stops being ruled by emotion, something subtle but profound shifts around him. The silence that once felt heavy now feels sacred. The calm that once looked weak now commands respect, because you've stopped chasing her energy and started mastering your own. You now own your focus, your reactions, your time. You no longer live at the mercy of anyone's validation. That quiet discipline, that self-control has become your greatest weapon. Marcus Aurelius said, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions, and your ambition is no longer to be liked, it's to be free." You're not proving your value anymore. You're living it. Your voice is calm, your movements deliberate, your silence meaningful, and she feels it. Even if she pretends not to, she knows something sacred has replaced her influence. The emotional access she once had is gone. Now you exist on a different frequency, detached, grounded, centered. She might still try to pull you back, not always out of love, but out of curiosity. Why doesn't he care anymore? What changed? But she won't find the answer in your words, because you've mastered the art of non-explanation. You don't justify your peace, you embody it. That's the rise of the Stoic. When your silence stops being defensive and becomes divine, when your self-control becomes your language, when your discipline becomes your presence, you are no longer the man who reacts, you are the man who decides. You're no longer chasing attention, you're building legacy. And that's what makes you powerful. Not your emotion, but your mastery of it. The man she once thought she could control now controls himself, and that's something no one can ever take away. Power doesn't shout, it radiates. It moves quietly through energy, through stillness, through the absence of need. She can feel it without a single word. You once orbited her world, reacting to her moods and silences. Now you've become the center of your own, and she feels that gravity. At first, she won't admit it. She'll say she's moved on, that she doesn't care. But deep down, she knows something has shifted, because when a man becomes emotionally self-sufficient, he becomes magnetic. Not the loud, desperate kind of attraction, but the quiet pull of presence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." And that's where your power lives now, within your calm. The same silence she once mistook for weakness has become your armor. Every time she tries to provoke and gets nothing, every time she tries to touch your ego and you remain centered, she loses more of her hold. And here lies the paradox. The more indifferent you become, the more she starts to care. The more you focus on yourself, the more she begins to focus on you, because she no longer recognizes the man who once needed her validation. Now Adrian walks differently. He speaks slower, with measured pauses, as if each word carries its own gravity. At 35, he moves through life with the quiet certainty of a man who could lose everything and still remain whole. Clara doesn't understand it yet, but she can feel the consequences of his composure. Her mind races. Why doesn't he react anymore? Who taught him this calm? Why does he seem freer without me? That's the shift she never saw coming, the reversal of power. The same energy she once used to control him now chases him. Adrian has become the calm she cannot imitate, the peace she cannot find, the strength she cannot break. This is what true discipline creates, quiet dominance, not through force or ego, but through stillness. He no longer seeks to control her. He has mastered control of himself, and in doing so, he's become the one thing she can neither manipulate nor forget. There's something almost sacred about a man who becomes truly unmoved. The more Adrian pulls his energy inward, the more Clara is drawn toward it. The feminine, by nature, seeks the presence of masculine stability, and when that presence can't be manipulated, it becomes magnetic. At first, Clara resists. Her pride won't let her admit what she feels. But over time, his discipline works on her like gravity, slow, steady, undeniable. The same stillness she once mocked now fascinates her. The same silence she once weaponized now calls to her. She begins to soften, not out of strategy, but because her ego is losing its grip. She starts to realize Adrian is no longer playing by emotional rules. He doesn't argue, doesn't chase, doesn't prove anything. He simply is calm, whole, complete. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be like the rock against which the waves break, standing firm while the sea's fury falls still around it." That's what Adrian has become, the immovable presence, the calm in the storm. When the feminine meets that kind of calm, something ancient awakens within her respect. Clara doesn't know why, but she begins to feel drawn to him again, not to his words, not to his attention, but to his energy, the same energy she once took for granted, now suddenly rare, because few men can hold such stillness. Fewer can do it without bitterness. She remembers the man she once tried to mold and realizes the one standing before her now is far beyond that version. Adrian doesn't need her to change, to understand, or to return. He has transcended attachment, and that very lack of need creates space. His restraint creates contrast. His peace creates desire. For the first time, Clara isn't trying to control him, she's trying to understand him. Because what she now sees is a man in complete command of himself. There comes a moment in every man's evolution when he becomes untouchable, not because he hides, but because he's found. Adrian has found a depth of peace so profound that no one's chaos can enter it. He has become what few men ever reach, a man who needs nothing yet commands everything. His stillness is no longer self-defense, it's wisdom. He doesn't avoid her energy out of fear. He transcends it because he's outgrown it. She feels it, the shift in the air whenever his name is mentioned. She used to feel power at the thought of him. Now she feels pressure. His silence no longer carries emotion, it carries presence. Marcus Aurelius said, "Tranquility comes when you stop caring what they say or think or do, and care only for what you do." Adrian has reached that level. He's so inwardly complete that outside validation feels like noise. He no longer reacts to temptation, guilt, or manipulation, not because he's numb, but because he's free. That freedom makes him unreachable. He's risen from the emotional battlefield, seen every weapon thrown at his peace, and realized that nothing external can wound what's already whole inside. Clara may still test the waters, a text, a memory, a subtle attempt to re-enter his mind, but it never lands. The man she once controlled is gone. In his place stands something she can't define, a paradox, close enough to remember, distant enough to revere. His silence is sacred now. His indifference isn't cold, it's divine. And that realization shatters her ego more than any revenge ever could. How can you manipulate a man who has mastered detachment? How can you control a man who governs himself? You can't. You admire him from afar and call it mystery. Adrian has become that mystery, the man who can't be provoked, can't be predicted, can't be possessed. That's the unreachable man, the final stage of discipline. His peace is no longer a state he visits, but a kingdom he rules. There comes a point when peace stops being a practice and becomes one's nature. Adrian no longer wakes up thinking about what Clara is doing, who she's with, or whether she remembers him. None of it carries weight anymore. He's detached not just from her, but from everything that once ruled him. This is his ascension, rising above validation, reaction, and emotional turbulence. He doesn't need to prove he's healed. His stillness says everything. He doesn't need to show he's changed. His energy speaks louder than words. He has become the embodiment of balance, strong yet calm, silent yet intense, peaceful yet powerful. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." And that's what Adrian has done. He no longer preaches peace, he is peace. He no longer chases discipline, he embodies it. He no longer talks about control, he radiates it. The emotions that once threw him off balance now move around him like wind around a mountain. They touch him, but they don't move him. He's learned the difference between attachment and connection, between silence and suppression, between ego and essence. That's why he stands differently now, not harder, but lighter. His energy doesn't pull, it attracts. His words don't demand, they guide. His silence doesn't isolate, it commands respect. This is the ascension of the Stoic, when the man a woman once tried to control becomes the man she now studies in silence, not because he's perfect, but because he's present. Adrian has transcended the noise. Ethan moves differently now, stillness in motion, a quiet storm that everyone can feel but no one can shake. That's his final transformation. The man who once drowned in emotion now rules himself through discipline. In the end, Clara didn't lose control because Ethan punished her. She lost control because he found peace. He stopped reacting. He stopped explaining. He stopped fighting battles that no longer existed. And that's when she finally understood her power was never over him. It was over the man he used to be, but that man no longer lives here. Ethan has become something else now, something rare. He's the kind of man who moves through chaos with calm. He feels deeply but acts deliberately. He knows that real strength doesn't come from resistance, but from restraint. That's stoic discipline, quiet authority that doesn't need to prove, argue, or perform. It's the kind of strength that can love without attachment, walk away without hate, and remain silent without fear. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And Ethan's thoughts are no longer chained to anyone's approval. They're focused on growth, purpose, and mastery. He's taken the same energy that once reacted and transformed it into fuel for his evolution. Clara will remember him not as the man she once controlled, but as the one who became untouchable, because true power never announces itself. It doesn't need to. It sits in silence, and the world adjusts to it. So Ethan breathes deeply, steadily. He has walked through the noise and emerged whole. He has mastered the only thing worth mastering, himself. In a world that worships reaction, he chose restraint. This is his blessing, the calm after the storm. The stoic within him no longer seeks control over others. He embodies control within. He doesn't raise his voice, yet his presence speaks louder than words. He doesn't chase, yet everything meant for him finds its way back. That's the quiet victory of the disciplined man, the man who no longer lives to prove, but to be. Ethan has become that man. Calm, purposeful, unshakable.